Recording in progress.
Thank you, Steve. It's wonderful to be here and to be able to co-work on this service with Steve and to see everyone in the room and on Zoom today. It's joyful. I came today, really, I thought I had the deck of cards stacked. I truly did. You see, it's about casual acquaintances and tiny stories that I want to talk about, and the warmth. I mean, what better group to talk to than this group about that? But last night, about 6 p.m., I was walking by our dining room table, and our grandson was there, and he had a stack of Uno cards. Have you ever played Uno? Well, he had them dealt out, so there was 7 cards for each of us. He said, "Grandpa, do you want to play a game?" I looked at him, I said, "You've stacked the deck." And then he said it to him again, "You've stacked the deck." Then he looked at me, he said, "Grandpa," he said, "one of the piles has 4 better cards than the other." And he said, "I had them at first, but now I've given them to you." So what I knew was up here is, he didn't do this to let me win and feel good about myself. He didn't want me to have an excuse for losing. Now, I will share the outcome of this game in about 20 minutes' time. There's a song the late John Prine wrote. It's called "Hello in There," and the last verse went, "If you're walking down the street someday and you spot those hollow ancient eyes, please don't pass them by and stare as if you didn't care. Say hello in there, hello." That's the premise of our talk. You see, I see life through story, and that to me is a tiny story. And if we go through those motions, we can save that story in us. It's a positive. And I want to talk now about a situation that could happen really anywhere in Canada or right here in Sarnia for sure. It could be Lambton Mall, it could be No Frills, or it could be Exmouth Street. Now I'm going to tell it on Exmouth Street. Now if you're familiar, there's a pathway that runs, actually it's Front Street. It runs from Exmouth down Front Street north and into our little crown jewel, Canatera Park. It's a wide pathway. It goes under the 402 and makes its way there. So we're going to start there. And we're on the south side of the 402 and we're looking up at it and we walk and we're in under now that underpass and we look and we see the sloping concrete that goes up the side and there's a little slope right underneath the 402. And we see a toque there and we see a pair of shoes and then a sock and our eyes go up further and we see the end of a sleeping bag. We go, wow, if somebody's not sleeping in there now, they probably will be tonight. The toque, it's a beautiful warm day, mid-September. And we think about it. What must it be like 5 feet below the 402 with all those idling trucks and all those cars, sleeping on hard concrete, laying our head on hard concrete? And would they be hungry? Well, we continue our walk and we go outside now just into the sunlight again. And we look to our right and there's a shopping cart. There might be a blouse and there's a belt and maybe another shirt and some clothes in the bottom of it. We look at that shopping cart and then we look back up at that sleeping bag and we think, are the two connected? Probably. But we continue on our way. You see, we're headed to see the sunset. We've saw the sky. It's got those little wisps of clouds up high and then some deeper clouds in underneath and then the blue sky. It's like an artist prepared this for us. It's going to be a magnificent sunset. We walk, we approach Light Street, and we see 4 people coming toward us. We realize they're young. We can tell by the way they're walking. In fact, there's 2 young men in the back, and one's a little taller, and he's got his arm around the other, and they're talking. Then there's a young lady and a young man in front, and they're talking. And it's fun to watch them because they don't look synchronized in their walking. They look like they could trip one another, but they don't, because there's a synchronicity about them. There's a friendship. There's a newness. Then we go mid-September. There's an intake at Lambton College of international students. I bet they're international students. Pretty good guess. They walk toward us. We make eye contact with all 4. They smile at us. We say, "Good morning, how are you?" And they say, "We're great." Then we look at them and say, are you new to Sarnia? And they say, yes. We're students at Lambton College. We're from India. And you say, welcome to Sarnia. And we pass one another, headed in our own direction. What just happened there? Well, the experts would say there's been a hormonal change in all of us. They call it dopamine. It's a pleasant, happy feeling. And I ask each and every one of you, because I know you do it, when you greet someone in a similar manner, think about how you feel. Because I feel warm. I feel almost giddy at what just took place. This is a tiny story that I can save right here. And it's warm. And it's happy. Now, we also know with casual acquaintances, people we meet, not every day, a conversation can strike up. So I know there are people who might think, well, I've had conversations or started them that I regretted with people I didn't know. That happens to all of us. Personally, I look at it like I know there are some people who give me energy, and I know there are some people who take my energy. But I also know that there's some people who I take their energy, and there's some people who I give energy to. But I'm going to take this is a whole new level of energy. Because often when we meet people, it transfers between us and we don't know it. So we're standing there looking at them, and in our mind, we're going, this person's got something to say that I want to hear. And they're going, you know what? I think this is a conversation I want to have. Well, back on May 7th this year, Beth and I, we were at a concert at the Lawrence House. In the break, we met someone who we'd never met before. I guess they became a casual acquaintance, but a discussion broke out, and that led me to a book. You see, when I hear this, something like this, I really lock it in. So I went home and called the bookkeeper, and I ordered it. Now, this book is perfect for me, and I can honestly tell you that I am confident I never would have made my way to this book had I not had that conversation. Guaranteed. Now, that book is called Tiny Tales, and it's written by a gentleman called Alexander McCall Smith. Now, the one little write-up in the bottom says, there's not a more charming author on the face of the earth, Seattle Times. So you know how much I like tiny stories and telling stories. So this was very important for me and came from a casual conversation. So this morning, I'd like to share the first story in this book with you, if I can. And it is called Descent. Molly wanted to do, and I'm going to back up just for one moment. This book brought a lot of smiles to me. So every story in it brought smiles. So I want to leave that with you. Molly wanted to do a parachute jump. You can't do a parachute jump, her friend said. Why would you want to? What is the purpose? What is the point? Well, that was a good question. What is the point of jumping out of an airplane and tumbling down through the air? Is it the deliberate courting of risk? Or is it trying to prove something about yourself, namely that you can jump out of an airplane? Well, this was a difficult question. It was not a simple question to answer. So Molly simply said, I might meet someone. You never know. And her friend said, a parachute jump? Mockingly? Meet someone? Are you serious? Well, Molly went to the parachute club and she met an exceedingly handsome instructor known as Drop Dead Gorgeous. Now, we must admit, this is not a good name or a nickname for a parachutist. But Molly did not know that at the time. All right, said Drop Dead Gorgeous. Molly, I'm going to strap you to me. We are going to jump out of the aircraft strapped together. Do you have any questions? Molly tried to think of a question, but the only one she could think of was, how long will it last? Well, she was not really thinking about the jump itself, but how long she would be strapped to the instructor. Well, they went up in the airplane and they looked down at the ground. And Molly thought, wow, look at that countryside, those small fields parceled together, and rivers, tiny silver veins, and cars. They look like minute beetles running down there. Oh, she thought, the earth is dear. Are you comfortable? Said Drop Dead Gorgeous. Very, said Molly. Well, the descent took very little time, and the earth came up very quickly. But the instructor landed first and cushioned the landing for Molly. She looked right into his eyes. She said, that was wonderful. And he looked down and he smiled. And he said, well, we don't need to unstrap just yet. We could go for a coffee. He did the walking. Now, Molly, being strapped to the instructor, her feet did not reach the ground. But she was happy being carried, more than happy, perhaps. So after coffee, he said, you know what? We could go for a walk, and we don't need to get unstrapped just yet. Well, they spent that day together in close proximity. And at the end, he said, I feel very close to you. And she said, so do I. She was convinced that she had just found the man she had always been looking for. And so was he. Mutatis mutandis, of course. I'm going to give up jumping, he promised. And she was relieved. But he thought her relief was because she was worried about the dangers inherent in parachuting. But that was not the real reason. She just did not want anyone else connected to him. And that was reasonable to her. But at the same time, she also knew the important aspect of any long-term relationship is not to get too clingy. Thank you. So that came to me, and I certainly enjoyed it. I hope you did. But that led me on to a little more research, which always is the case. And I started to read about, it was back in 1973, a gentleman, his name was Granovetter, and I think he worked for Stanford, but he wrote this paper, and it's called The Strength of Weak Ties. And I started to read it, and my understanding of it is basically this. We have strong ties and weak ties in our life. Our strong ties are those close to us. Maybe best friends, maybe some family. Basically, we're all skating on the same pond. We know each other well. We know about each other. We're there for emotional support when things go wrong. But we also have weak ties in our lives. Those are the casual acquaintances that drift around. Some we see once a week, maybe once a month. But he outlined the importance of those weak ties. And he pointed out that is where we get our ideas from. That is where we gain information. And weak ties and casual acquaintances give us an opportunity to enter new social circles and meet new people. He outlined the importance. It led me to this. But there's something, I'll be quite honest with you, really troubled me. And that is, so often when we have weak acquaintances, it's utilized. It's utilized by companies. Now, I'm not against corporations. I actually support business. But there are mechanisms in place that they can reach out to those outliers and they can reach out to those social groups and they can sell. And the term storytelling sometimes bothers me because it's used by everyone. It's used by business. If you look up Forbes, it'll say, if you want to sell, you've got to be a good storyteller. It's used by filmmakers. They say, you've got to tell a good story. And then they plant a BMW in the middle of that story. So I think I'm going to drive down Front Street in a BMW when I'm thinking about it. They're not storytellers, they're story sellers. And I truly believe that. And you think about, we've had recently a whole lot of gambling ads, all associated with sports. So who do they pull in? Wayne Gretzky. I mean, his story is one of the greatest stories in the NHL. And he stands in front and he sells. It's story selling. It's not storytelling. The great one has just sold. So I think it's very important to keep this in mind. And I look at it like this. I'm a storyteller. And when I take a story, I tell it to you. It might be from a book like this. I've read it several times. I'm almost like that business. That story's become something else to me because I've wanted to share it. So I've taken my own meanings. I never try to premise that story. I may put a little of my mark on it in telling, that's always the case, but I'll never premise it or tell you what I want you to hear. And that's what so many corporations are doing, and they're utilizing data to do it. They're telling us what to hear. There's not a listening aspect to it. We're not listening. We're being told. And just a couple weeks ago, I came here to the Unitarian Fellowship. 4 people shared their stories on what brought them here. Right? Years ago, what brought them here? You know what made me feel good is, and you could talk to me after, but I think you all came through a casual acquaintance at that time. And you came here and you sat in this room and you saw the principles. You heard a service and met people. You maybe came a second or third time, but each and every one of you said you were in the right community. This is what drew you. And that is storytelling. The Unitarian Fellowship told the story, but you had a chance to listen and to make your own decision. And that to me is the true aspect and the beauty of being able to share, is that we get a chance to listen and come up with our own ideas and our own thoughts and make our own decisions. So with that, I would like to thank you this morning for sharing your time with me. And I just want to tell you the outcome of that card game. We have an Uno player. How many people in the room think that I won that Uno game? Thank you. And how many people in the room think our grandson won that Uno game? And was it Claire? You're right, Claire, he did. There's a story in that. There is a story. Thank you.